And it is my pleasure now to invite Ms. Alison CRABB. Alison CRABB has been working in the European Commission since 1999. At present, she is the head of the Skills and Qualifications Unit in the Director General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. Her team is working with member states, social partners and other stakeholders to improve skills development and skills intelligence for better career choices. And to make skills and qualifications more visible and comparable. Most recently, she was closely involved with developing the new skills agenda for Europe and the European Pillar of Social Rights. So, Ms. CRABB, the floor is yours to tell us about the Lifelong Guidance Policy agenda in Europe.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. And thank you, first of all, to Mart Leibniz and to the whole Estonian presidency team for welcoming us here in Tallinn. And for taking the initiative on this event. I was in Tallinn two weeks ago in another part of town and was able to join another presidency conference, this time on the issue of future of work. And preparing for today, it gave me food for thought because there's clearly very strong links between the debate that we were having 2 weeks ago and the discussion that we will have today and tomorrow. In another venue 2 weeks ago, we were exploring issues around the phenomenon which we call the future of work, but which in fact to a great extent are already with us. And these are the phenomena around digitization, global value chains, changing demographics. We're not yet living to 150, but maybe that's not so far off. And in the discussions there, we certainly heard a lot of positive examples and inspiring examples, many of them from Estonia, and Mr. Leibniz said it. Small is beautiful in this case. A country like Estonia has been able to be quick and flexible in shaping and, let's say, picking up the most positive opportunities offered by the changing world of work. Thank you. We heard about business innovations, about flexible ways of working, so a lot of the good news, let's say. But we also spent some time at that conference looking at the challenges that we're grappling with linked to the future of work. And I think they can be summed up under one quite straightforward term, which is the issue of multiple transitions. And this is an idea, of course, even when we look back to the Council resolutions on guidance from now more than 10 years ago. This issue already then was one that was preoccupying us. And I would say that in the last decade, it's something which has only become more obvious. The move away from quite linear careers to a much more flexible and fluid situation where people are moving in and out of jobs, careers, in and out of employment types, in and out, hopefully, also of education and training. We can ask ourselves the question, in fact, in this context, what is really today typical work? Is there such a thing as typical work? And one interesting fact that we were discussing at that conference was the finding of the recent labour force survey that around 60% of people in Europe are in full-time employment of indefinite duration, 60%. The other 40% being part-time, self-employed, temporary employment. So I think it's a valid question for us with an interesting guidance also to ask ourselves that question, what is nowadays typical work, a typical employment situation? So if we ask ourselves the question really, are we well prepared for this future? I think that the honest answer is perhaps not particularly in some regards. And if we look only here at issues around skills and learning, of course, one very striking figure, and I'm sure we'll come back to it in the next couple of days, 70 million adults in Europe who don't have a basic level, an adequate level of digital literacy and numeracy skills. So these are the people in a situation of a very fluid, fast-moving labour market, of course, who are the most vulnerable to the less positive phenomena that we see in the changing world of work. So I think in introduction, I wanted to come back to that, that bigger picture, because it's fair to say really that for all of us, this is one of the challenges, the social and economic challenges that we're facing, harnessing, if you like, the opportunities offered by the future of work, getting out of reactive mode and into action. So where does guidance come into this picture? I have a low-tech graphic behind me. I couldn't pick up any of the smart Estonian digital technology to use in this case, but I think what this graphic shows you is the simple message that from our perspective, guidance must be a link in this quite complex policy chain of responding to the challenges in the future world of work. If we start with a very open question then on the policy front, where are we today with lifelong guidance policy at European level? We can, I think, be proud and pleased of the fact as a guidance community that over the last 10 years or so, looking at the quite numerous initiatives that have come forward on European level around upskilling, reskilling, job matching, guidance finds its place. It is anchored in all of those policy initiatives and policy documents agreed and endorsed politically by member states. So whether that's around early school leaving, the youth guarantee, for example, long-term unemployment, integration of long-term unemployed. In all of these policy documents, when you dig into them, you will find that guidance has its place firmly anchored in those policies. And that, I think, we need to see as a big step forward compared to perhaps a decade ago. Guidance is also a red thread, of course, in the new skills agenda for Europe. And we'll come back in the next couple of days to talk about that in more detail. In the workshops, I know that we'll have a chance to focus in on the important question of guidance in context. And as James Kaleja was underlining very eloquently, guidance is delivered in a context. In fact, and as you know better than me, a very wide range, very diverse range of contexts. And that is now the challenge that we're facing. I won't talk in much detail here about those contexts. We'll come back to them in the workshops, but I want to just highlight from the Commission perspective 3 very crucial areas, policy areas where we see that guidance has its role to play and where we need to make a concerted effort to make sure that it fulfills its potential. One of them being validation of non-formal and informal learning. And I think we can easily see from the context of the fast shifting labour market, the increasingly important role of validation of learning acquired outside formal systems, making visible that learning, giving a value to that learning. Member states, as you know, have committed by the end of next year to putting in place national arrangements for this validation, and we'll be reporting on them in the course of next year. Guidance, very crucial link in that chain. Without guidance, validation will not work as it should do. A second policy field I want to focus in on is upskilling pathways. So upskilling adults with low skills, below the equivalent of an upper secondary qualification. Member states now are committed to reaching out to that population, many of them, of course, very vulnerable and in difficult situations, offering a skills assessment, offering tailored learning, and offering opportunities to have those skills validated and recognised. So here again, guidance must be part of that particular chain, upskilling the adult population. Thirdly then, the issue of integrating migrants and refugees in our labour markets. Here again, if we look on their integration as a pathway with different steps in that chain, beyond identifying the skills which migrants and refugees bring with them, directing them further down that pathway, accompanying them and supporting them either into employment or into further education and training opportunities requires very solid and expert guidance systems and practitioners. So I think on the policy front, my first conclusion would be that in recent years we have managed to reach a situation where we see guidance firmly anchored in those headline initiatives on upskilling, reskilling, education and training. Let's have a look at practice then, and I think that's also our concern here over the next couple of days. And here, as you might expect in this very complex field where many, many stakeholders are involved, the picture on practice is more mixed. Member states take a variety of approaches, of course, that's entirely normal in line with their own national circumstances and your own features, but it would be fair to say, I think, that guidance still has a way to go in practice and delivery to reach its full potential and the ambition which we see reflected in the policy documents. Many of you will know the figure from a recent Eurobarometer survey. We quote it a lot, that most respondents were very clear that they see a value and a need for guidance in terms of education and training choices and career choices. But in fact, only 1 in 4 respondents to the survey had themselves used guidance services, and they were typically higher educated respondents, and they were typically people who had used it during their higher education experience. So I think that gives us a snapshot, let's say, of one of the dimensions that we're trying to tackle when working together on expanding guidance delivery. So what can we do to bring practice closer to the policy ambition, to close the gap, if you like, and to get closer to the ambition of the 2008 recommendation, which clearly sees guidance as a continuous service available to all, and as James said, spread across very diverse contexts. I would highlight 3 fields for thought and further discussion in the next couple of days, where from the Commission side we can see scope for working together further. One of them, certainly, information. How much do we know? How much do we understand about what is actually happening in terms of guidance policy and practice across member states and in different contexts? So building a picture, as full a picture as possible, of up-to-date information on different practices and policies. This seems to us to be the evidence base that has to underpin our further reflection and our further work. Secondly, taking every opportunity to collaborate together, whether it's peer learning, mutual learning, information sharing, clusters of countries working together, certainly not to copy-paste systems, that wouldn't work in this field, but to adopt promising practices and policies, and to learn from each other. And thirdly, then, the practical tools, and as we've already heard indicated this morning, there is a wealth of practical tools already out there, and with the great support of CEDEFOP, more are in development, tailored to the needs of individuals in different contexts. So with those 3 lines of work, information, collaboration, practical tools, these we see as promising tracks for follow-up in taking guidance delivery and work together at the European level to the next chapter. How can we do this, of course, is the big question. Easy to say, more difficult to do, but we do have tools which can help us work together, knowing that the competence, the responsibility, of course, in this field is anchored with member states. At European level, of course, we have tools that can help us, and indeed experience to build on. First of all, it would be rude on the 25th anniversary of Euroguidance Network not to start by mentioning them. Very strong and positive experience over the last 25 years of people working together in that network to build knowledge, to share experience, to support learning mobility across Europe, to develop the competence of guidance practitioners. So there we have a strong network which will certainly continue its activities, develop its activities as we go forward. Secondly, we have the very valuable work done, of course, by the ELGPN, the Lifelong Guidance Policy Network, which, as well as developing guidelines and tools which we can pick up, build on, use today, also planted the seeds in member states for creation of, I think, a very promising track forward in developing guidance cooperation, which is the multi-stakeholder dimension, the multi-stakeholder fora at national level, bringing together policymakers and practitioners from very different contexts to think together and work together about guidance. So the work of the network we can certainly draw on and build on. Thirdly, the New Careers Net initiative, piloted by the expert colleagues at CIDIFOP and had a kick-off meeting yesterday, which many of you will have been involved in. This, I think, is also a very promising track, building evidence, deepening information and knowledge, research in a coherent way, a comparable way, and also offering opportunities for mutual learning, discussion, and building a clearer picture at European level of what's happening in guidance policy and practice. Finally, final link in the chain of how we can actually deliver on future cooperation on guidance. Of course, we have, and will continue to have in future, a range of European funding instruments to support all of this, whether it's the European Social Fund, the Erasmus Plus programme, the Employment and Social Innovation, EASY programme. All of these taken as a whole offer support for mutual learning, information exchange, evidence building, practical projects for national guidance reform in the case of the European Social Fund. So we have a range of instruments, let's say, in the armoury, which we can use to make progress. So perhaps as a final word, I would particularly welcome the focus, the specific thematic focus of this conference on the potential of ICT in designing, delivering guidance tailored to the needs of the individual. And this, I know we will spend some time on in workshops, looking at the opportunities that ICT offers us to really reach into these different contexts and tailor guidance in a way which makes sense to the individual. This is the challenge that we're facing in this chapter of our work in guidance, and James summed it up very, very well. Guidance needs to reach out into these different contexts, leave perhaps or build on what has traditionally been its home in education and training, and reach into other fields of cooperation. There is experience of that. Let's learn from it. Let's build on it. So together with Commission colleagues, several of whom will be here both today and tomorrow, we're looking forward to working together with you on that. And we look forward to thinking together with you and discussing in the next couple of days. Thank you for your attention.